Salve, salve. Welcome to episode 8 of our DEI Rome 2 Total War recaps. We start off this rendition with our back against the wall. Our heir, Antiochus II, is in charge of the defence in the Eastern Hot Gates, as they have been named. Pergamon brought their experienced forces of their eastern conquest to bear against us as they began their counterattack. The Nicator Guard, as well as a local garrison, mounted a stubborn defence and are prepared for the onslaught. Outnumbered, and possibly for the first time out-equipped, they deployed in depth, with the local garrison acting as our vanguard. The plan was to tire the enemy's front line before sending in our veterans to mop up our exhausted enemy. Our peltasts along with our cavalry would act as our flank protectors, and when the time was right, if everything fell into place, the marketplace would once again become a slaughter yard. The enemy sent their skirmish cavalry forward in an attempt to harass and damage our front line. However, as always, our well-placed traps disrupted this, and constant fire arrow barrages kept them at bay and eventually routed them entirely. After some quick respite, the enemy's front line fell upon ours and the defensive effort truly began. Our local militia braced the front line and were confident in their task, as they had over 1,500 pikemen at the rear who would advance when the time was right, allowing them to disengage. As the first army entered the courtyard, the second army approached. We would have to hold the front and wait for the correct time to spring our trap. The enemy did also on multiple occasions attempt to flank us, but luckily we had blockaded and manned the approach. Patience was what had to be exercised now. With the enemy's two armies now more or less within the perimeters of the town, we began discreetly dispatching our flanking forces. Our pikes moved in as planned and took control of the front line. They now had to hold and buy us time as we moved the pieces of the jigsaw into place. Before long, the encirclement was complete, and we closed the tight grasp we had created. The enemy's warriors tried to fight for our route to escape, but it was too late. Any units that actually made it through the pike and hoplite walls were ran down by our patrolling cavalry. Our heir, our future king, had well and truly proven to be a worthy successor of Antiochus I, destroying an army outnumbering him almost 2-1 and successfully stopping the enemy from running riot in our newly conquered eastern reaches. However, the enemy threat in the region was not over. Their terrain was still largely unknown, and we did not know if any further forces waited for us in the high Caucasus Mountains. With the enemy's failure to the east in the pass, they launched a naval raid on our coastline to the north and managed to devastate the town with a surprise attack, looting it and causing lots of damage before retreating back out to sea. With this action, we assumed there were more enemy forces present, and it wasn't long before they showed themselves. Two further Pergamon armies of similar composition to before appeared to our east. However, this time they appeared to be taking the coastal route. Preparations would be made for the battle to come. In Medewi, we had finally cornered the remnants of the kingdom in their final settlement and managed to corner them and slay them without any real fight or problem. With this final conquest, we controlled the Nile and everything in the known world south of it. Only one speckle remained on our border to the southeast, Mascat. Preparations would be made, but it was quite a distance, as well as a route consisting of stubborn terrain. A naval approach would likely be best. Turning our focus back to Pergamon, the combined garrison armies of mid-Anatolia had drawn together in a freeway siege of Ankara. It was decided command would be delegated and that the royal overwatch was not necessary. We were happy to report the conquest of the city with little to no casualties of note on our side and the complete destruction of the enemy's forces. With Trapezus still repairing and recovering from the devastation of before, our heir moved his army there to help matters. That was until a Pergamon death stack was clocked on the horizon. Our commander Antiochus II wasted no time and advanced towards the enemy's forces. We occupied a small hill on the outskirts of their hastily assembled fort and awaited the challenge to battle. Sadly, this challenge did not arrive and we ended up having to march towards the enemy's position. It was our skirmishers that managed to get the enemy to advance as they began raining in death from afar. Veteran skirmishers under the expert command of a ranged weapons expert meant that they had expertise with their weapons which allowed them to shoot from further away. Then, the two lines clashed, horses on the flanks, pikes and hoplites in the centre, while skirmishers fired overhead. Our cavalry managed to win the engagement on the flank, which meant they had free running of the enemy's rear. They manoeuvred around and ran through the enemy's skirmishers, while our elite royal peltasts began folding around the enemy's flanks and engaging them from the side. This folding of our flanks meant that the enemy would once again be trapped. We were still to meet a foe in battle who could counter our light, fast-moving Sarissa lancers and infantry, our hammer and anvil. A number of successive hit and runs by our cavalry, combined with the repositioning of our pikes, meant the enemy were completely surrounded. With another successful encirclement, there would be few survivors. Antiochus II was very much living up to his king and adopted father's name. He had destroyed 3 of Pergamon's veteran armies in the east with only 1 remaining. Its location, however, was unclear. We took overview of our lands in the aftermath of the battle. We had fully conquered everything south of Aegyptus, and now had our hearts set on conquering all of the Arabian Peninsula. In the north, Pergamon still lay divided, and we were very much destroying their capital in the surrounding regions, while keeping their armies at bay in the east. This brought them begging for peace. The council, very quickly and unanimously, decided to continue with the war. It was unclear if their attempts at peace talks were a bluff or genuine, as an army appeared not long after just outside Trapezos. Antiochus II took command once again. He was clearly hoping to end the Pergamon threat in the east. Destroying this army would make victory here all but complete. We were supported by a small defensive army that had been placed here in case of a surprise attack, made up of mostly local recruits. Our heir commanded his section and had no remorse for his previous slaughtering of the Pergamon menace, likely looking to replicate his previous actions here. Eager to complete his victory, he ordered an advance to march towards the enemy's defensive position. Much to his surprise, they began marching almost simultaneously. It's unclear what exactly happened, but we believe that the previous atrocities committed by our soon-to-be king must have been echoing throughout the enemy's lands. The enemy's force bundled up on the hill and lacked any real cohesion. Our general expertly ordered his men to hold back engaging and folded his infantry supported by our cavalry around the enemy's lines, slowly but surely encircling our enemy in its entirety. Perhaps one of the cleanest cut manoeuvrings as yet. The enemy's forces were completely smothered. Our men were ordered to move in, and the enemy's forces were ran through, and like the previous 3 armies before them, were slaughtered to a man. With another disastrous defeat, we assumed this was the final straw for Pergamon. By this point they must have lost a significant portion of their overall population, with over 35,000 dead in battle against us in this war alone. However, an enemy naval force appeared from nowhere and attacked Trapezos. There was clearly something about this core province in Pontus that drew so much attention from the enemy. Our garrison ships volunteered to ram the enemy general's command ship, aiming to sink him before he could make it ashore. This would likely be a suicide attack meaning death, but they were quoted as saying, "For Pontus." With the enemy's forces being entirely naval based, we withdrew back into the town and decided to let the enemy land before charging at them with everything we had. Then, we sprung the trap, launching everything we had towards them, hoping to corner them with their backs against the coastline and nowhere to escape to. Our general led the charge from horseback, and before long we had them trapped and cut them down like a farmer gathering his harvest. Trapezos was once again safe. There was no time to take a breath. Our satrapy Parthiva was attacked by Mushki. They were allied to one of Pergamon's allies who had not yet joined the war with us. This would surely drag them in. As always, as a fair and benevolent ruler, we entered the war on the side of our satrapy. We did this willingly, knowing that it would open us up to new enemies. With the need to manoeuvre our frontline forces, our 3 garrison armies that took Ankara had been consolidated into 2 forces, with one heading to Nicomedia, where we managed to capture the town with little resistance, meaning the capital of Pergamon lay wide open for the taking. With Pergamon licking their wounds, Antiochus moved forward towards Phasis and began raiding the enemy's countryside, hoping to lure them towards us in a pitched battle at a location of our choosing. Unfortunately, with our army out of province, yet another Pergamon naval raid hit Trapezos. This time the defensive forces were not adequate enough, and they fell without much resistance to our badly bloodied enemy. Antiochus II was thrown into a blind rage of learning this, and launched an attack perhaps a little prematurely on the final Pergamon army outside Phasis, who were supported by the local garrison. This penultimate battle was likely the decider for control of the east, with Pergamon fielding little else in the way of a cohesive army. On the battlefield the enemy had a fort, and due to the haste of our deployment, the battle would be fought in thick fog. The fog concealed our enemy's approach, and to their credit, the reinforcements arrived on the field and attacked us from one flank, while their standing army attacked us from the other. We now began an engagement where we would be fighting on two fronts awkwardly sandwiched in the middle. We scrambled the defence together and hoping to catch the enemy's reinforcements before they could arrive at the enemy's fort. Both sides' cavalry engaged each other, and the jostle began for control of the flanks. Our companion cavalry won decisively and opened up the enemy's left. The enemy infantry then began engaging with our royal peltasts. Our elite infantry here would have the volume of the work fall on them initially while our pikes arrived to the front. We then realised the enemy were sallying out of their fort, and we would have to defend on two sides. Our solid front line then became a somewhat misshapen L, with a significantly weaker flank on our right. As the enemy moved in to engage, we had attempted to move our Syrian levies into the gaps to hold a line, but they proved to be under-equipped and simply not up to the task, routing and running from the field. Our cavalry would be constantly hitting the enemy, then retreating, and Antiochus II even began commanding these charges personally, committing his bodyguard. Our right flank was faltering as their right flank began showing cracks. It would come down to who could hold out the longest. Then, our cavalry on the left managed to swing in behind the main blob of the enemy's forces, and a chain rout began. The enemy's warriors began clambering against one another in an attempt to break away from our front line, only to be greeted by our companion cavalry. The left was won, but was it too late? Our right side was largely surrounded, and no unit remained without having sustained heavy damage. Our companion cavalry, accompanied by our general, charged the enemy's centre, and they immediately began breaking. All that remained was to reform as best we could, and face down what remained of the enemy's forces. Repeated hit-and-run cavalry charges, as well as our infantry planting their standard and holding their ground, were what would win us this day. Before long, Antiochus II, our heir, had defeated Pergamon likely once and for all. However, this victory came at quite a cost. His army was left licking their wounds, and some time would be needed to recuperate and resupply before attacking north along the coast. Antiochus II was said to have been so full of rage that he immediately ordered his army to attack Phasis. The settlement garrison was made an example of and slaughtered while the war council discussed and voted on the fate of the town. After some prominent senators throwing their weight into the vote, it was decided Phasis would be liberated and a new satrapy established under the name of Egrisi. They would hopefully continue to be loyal and act as a border to the northern plains beyond the mountains. Diplomacy was still on the cards. Parthia then decided to attack Sagartia, meaning they were declaring war on us for the fifth time. It was hoped that this time our satrapies could handle them. We were not currently in a position to send any forces to assist them. Egrisi was then discussed once again. Despite being only recently liberated and brought under our protection, they found themselves being attacked from the northern coast of the Black Sea. Crimea had came knocking, and we once again found ourselves entering another war to protect one of our satrapies. We then found ourselves surrounding Sardes' capital, one of Pergamon's few remaining allies. The attack was delegated to our commanders, and we found ourselves now with both hands around the throat of Pergamon, our enemy's capital city. The sun was beginning to set for our Anatolian enemy. The combined army and naval forces began embarking and sailing from Ptolemy Throne, destined for the coast of Mascat. Everything was beginning to fall into place. Sinope and Trapezos were then next. Both towns found themselves bending the knee to us, and with ease we welcomed them back into our kingdom. We now ruled almost continuously from the Nile, Red Sea region to the Black Sea in the north. Parthia, being the absolute mess that they were, then came crawling back to us. They had lost territory to our satrapies and came begging. They were not currently our primary concern, so it was decided that we would demand war reparations and deal with them later. A true wildcard then occurred. Someone who we have had very little dealings with other than pleasantries attacked our satrapy Sardes. The great city-state of Athens preaching their peaceful democracy were the offenders. They had manoeuvred an army and fleet into position off the coast of Side and declared war as their forces were landing, a true sign of treachery that would not go unpunished. This new development meant that our long war with Pergamon should be brought to a close, and swiftly. With our enemy being so weak, we delegated the assault on our enemy's capital to our commanders. Pergamon fell into our hands, and the once great rival of ours was nothing more than an obscure shattered kingdom. We're once again, I would say, our greatest territorial mass. We've obviously conquered the Horn of Africa. We still have Muscat to go. We are en route along the southern Arabian coast. There's an army and a navy in tow. And we're going to have to raise an army here. We're going to have to raise an army in Hagar to possibly defend and maybe counterattack there. Our satrapies did struggle with Parthia again. Parthia and Saka are fighting each other, so that's good for now. However, Parthia did liberate Susia, so we're going to have to keep an eye on that situation. And to the north, you can see Pergamon are well and truly backed into a corner. Their two provinces are literally miles apart. In fact, I don't think they can actually pass to them, so that's pretty fantastic. And we control most of mainland Anatolia. In fact, we control all of mainland Anatolia now, other than this little red blemish. We did unfortunately end the episode with Athens declaring war on us and assaulting an attacking side, which they won the battle and decided to loot the settlement, so they're currently standing there. We're trying to scramble our conquering army from Pontus south to hopefully counterattack and kill them. And then honestly, I think we'll be looking to go straight to Athens and set up a base camp in Greece. A quick thanks to Kyle from the past for that on-stream summary, saving me some time just now. The content you've watched this evening is streamed in its entirety on my Twitch channel. There will be a link in the description below should you wish to get involved there. I'll be streaming the next rendition live on my channel on Monday the 19th of July, starting at 2000 BST. It looks as if we will finally be making a return to Greece and reconquering the core provinces of Alexander's empire. There's not much left to say other than thank you once again. I look forward to seeing how the story will unfold, and I will catch you then.